Yes, that's right. It's the Squeeze on Primetime Sports Talk. My name is Logan Lockhart. That right there is my co-host and partner in crime, Tyler Milliken. We do this every week. If you're watching, it's on YouTube, Primetime Sports Talk. If you're listening, you can find that on all platforms, Apple, Spotify, whatever you want. We're there. The Squeeze. Type it in. Find us. Baseball Talk. We got you covered. Tyler, how you doing this week?
I'm doing good. It's been another interesting week of baseball. We have some negative headlines. I feel like we're talking about a couple pretty depressing things in terms of injuries and firings this week. But listen, when you get into the middle of the season like this and, you lose the shininess of that first month and everyone's excited, everyone can accomplish anything. This is what happens.
It's interesting after the first month because a lot of people say when a guy's struggling, they're going, okay, it's early. But after the first month, then those people have the excuse of saying, no, 1 month has gone by now. So you know what? He is struggling. Francisco Lindor. Should Mets fans be booing him? Should they panic? I understand the market. I mean, I could have called it. Bryce Harper was getting booed in Philadelphia at some point. Let's not forget. Should they be panicking about Lindor?
It's a tough situation. Would I say I'm sitting there and I'm not worried at all? No, because he really hasn't been the dynamic hitter that everyone fell in love with, since 2019. Let's be real. 2020 was a very, very average season from him. And what we've seen over the first month of this year is it's not even major league quality hitting. We're talking like a 160 batting average here. At the plate, he's just getting destroyed time and time again. People are looking at his mechanics and saying like, he's so out in front of the ball, it's not even funny. And I think you look at it, listen, I think Francisco Lindor will figure it out and still be a really good player. But would I be surprised if this is something that lasts a couple months and leaves that first season in New York as rather disappointing? No, I think honestly, it's starting to trend in that direction.
Well, they made the point on Sunday Night Baseball that was interesting. Yes, they did acquire him in a trade, but it felt more like a big fish signing because they signed him right away. So when that happens, there's going to be heat on you. And when Pete Alonso struggles, or if Brandon Nimmo struggles, you're not going to hear the fans booing. They're not going to boo Pete Alonso. He's a homegrown kid. He was drafted by the Mets. When you bring in someone who now has signed to a long-term deal and he struggles, you're going to hear it.
Yeah, and the other part is when you look at Steve Cohen and everything going on with that organization right now, this is the year everything's supposed to change. They've never really had, or at least in a long period of time since David Wright retired, they didn't have that true, face of baseball kind of guy on their team that was supposed to lead this organization for the next 10 years. Francisco Lindor is supposed to be that. All the hype that generated during spring training and over the offseason, you couldn't escape it. Everyone thought it was one of the most intriguing storylines of the year, and it's just completely fallen flat. And I like Francisco Lindor a lot. I give him so much credit. He's been positive out there, except talking to the pitcher. We've seen all the gifs of him getting hyped, when relievers are on the mound and all that. It's great, but something is going on with him right now. He seems stressed out or not stressed out. He just seems out of it. He just doesn't seem like that focus, that confidence is there. And, you looked at Francisco Lindor, he always came off as one of the most confident players in baseball. So it's a little weird seeing him there and just flailing at pitches time and time again.
And in big spots, bases loaded, here we go. And, he flies out. At least he's making some contact when it comes to that. Now, Chili Davis, the hitting coach, gone. And I understand it because, look, the Mets want to win now. So if you see an issue with your team and you identify that, well, you're going to make a move, right? Luis Rojas isn't going anywhere, so it's got to be the hitting coach.
Yeah, and they also got rid of Slater, the assistant hitting coach as well. And, I'm kind of looking at this. I'm not a Chili Davis fan. I'll be upfront about it. When he spent his time here with the Red Sox organization, it felt consistently underwhelming. Reports came out after he left the Red Sox, he departed at the same time John Farrell got fired. And the reports were just not impressed. I know John Henry went on to kind of call him out personally and say, just in terms of hitting, we didn't like our approach whatsoever the past year. And I look at Chili Davis and this Mets lineup, there's no excuse for them not to hit. None at all. You have so many different guys who are struggling and that have been really great players, whether you look at, a Michael Conforto, who's finally starting to get it going now, but this is a guy who's been one of the best players, one of the better players in baseball over the last few years. And it's just kind of upsetting. The only guys you can point to and feel somewhat good about are J.D. Davis and Jeff McNeil. Outside of that, there's Pete Alonso too. But overall, the lineup as a whole, they rank near the bottom of just about every single category. And like you said, Luis Rojas, you can't fire the manager this early in the season. And I'm going to be real with you. I don't think they're too far off. We're talking like June or July. If they're underperforming, he's the next one up. And I haven't been impressed with Luis Rojas at all. He hasn't done a thing since he took over manager to really excite me or light a fire. And that concerns me in a market like that, where, yeah, you have this team of really energetic and great guys, and it feels like Luis Rojas is just fading into the background. And you don't see that with an Alex Cora or even an Aaron Boone.
Yeah, in a weird situation because Carlos Beltran was supposed to be the manager, and we know that that couldn't happen for obvious reasons. And Luis Rojas put in this position. Yeah, you know what? You're not going to fire him on May 4th. You could fire him on July 4th, right?
Exactly.
If the team's not living up to what they are now. And I think this is going to be a theme of today's show. But you look around the NL East and you're going, okay, you know what? It doesn't look so bad for the Mets, right? If you looked at the Mets at face value, you'd say this is not good. This is a mess. Same with the Braves. You'd look at Atlanta and say, okay, no, this isn't going well. You look at the rest of the division, it's fine. I mean, there's no panic mode when the rest of your division is going at the rate it's at. You know, look at the NFC East in football last year. I mean, the Cowboys, look, I mean, for all the bad games that occurred, you can still say to yourself, they're a game out of first. Okay, so regroup, come back next week.
Yeah, and I think where the Mets are right now is they see, they've been lucky that they're not 5-6 games back like that, which could happen in a typical year where a bad first month puts you in a hole and you're playing catch up for the rest of the year. No, the rest of the division has had plenty of headaches. We see the Phillies and all the issues they're having right now. The Nationals between health and just inconsistency. It's time, if the Mets want to, they've been lucky to tread water this long. Making this move now, I think they're hoping this is what kind of launches them, gets them, back on track while they have a chance to take control of this division, especially early in the season when expectations are still so high for them.
What about the teams that have surprised you in a positive way? I mean, we can be negative all we want for the next 2 hours, but surprise teams. Pirates? How about those Pirates?
Listen, the Pirates have been very interesting to watch. Just a team where, you looked at them and many people immediately had them pegged for the worst team in baseball. Cabrian Hayes goes down, right at the start of the season. And it's like, what is there to hope for this team? But, they've had some guys, and it hasn't been just young guys. It's been, some of these mismatched toys, these guys they brought in that have kind of exceeded expectations. And it's been fun to watch. Just competitive baseball for the Pirates, which hasn't been there in a little bit. But the team I kind of lean towards and I've been excited about is the Giants. They're playing a really interesting brand of baseball where, the offense is what it is. You have Buster Posey, who has had a career resurgence. And listen, he's my favorite player of all time. So to see him kind of doing his thing, it is so fun to watch. Evan Longoria has been really solid, but the pitching is the story here. That rotation has been one of the best in baseball, second best ERA, eighth best FIP, I believe. And that starting rotation, listen, they lost Johnny Cueto, even though he had a great start to the year. And they've had guys, so many step up, whether it's been a Kevin Gausman, an Alex Wood, Anthony Descalfani, Aaron Sanchez coming back from the shoulder situation he had. And then you have Webb at the back end. To see those guys perform at this level, it's just a blast to watch. And I give a lot of credit to Gabe Kapler. People crapped on him for years. And it seems like he's got that team playing, well above what their expectations are. And they've had so many injuries. Donovan Solano's out. Mike Yastrzemski's out. These aren't small things. Tommy La Stella just went down. And they're continuing. They're not missing a beat. I can't help but respect that.
And they make this division real interesting. Now, if it wasn't already interesting before, of course, the NL West, one of the stories of the season in Major League Baseball, and now the Giants come in, and the Giants, and we talked about this a little bit before, they're going to have so much money to spend in the offseason. If this team is somewhat competitive into August, now I don't know what ownership's going to do in the offseason, but a big splash might be coming. I know that they were kind of in on Trevor Bauer, right? So they do have the money to spend it, and they are always in a position. They are the Giants, okay? They're always going to be in a position to spend money. I mean, look, they're always in to make a splash, no pun intended, with the stadium they play at. That's how it is.
No, you're right. And I think you can kind of look around. Is it Kevin Gausman? They gave him the qualifying offer this year, and he's led that staff and looked amazing. Is that where they're going to dish out a contract? Because he looks like he's going to get paid right now. But we remember the Giants, they were interested in Bryce Harper back when he was a free agent. They've been kind of sitting here and wondering, is there a way for me to slot in for one of these big guys? I think now you see that window moving forward. They have, we're not talking even about a Joey Bart who's in the minors right now, who could be another piece to supplement this roster. But it feels like they're really inching towards that competitive window where they're going to be a really interesting team. And there's a lot of shades of the previous dynasty, which is cool to see. But I look at them, I think they could be one of the teams that surprise you and go after, a shortstop, especially with Brandon Crawford. Listen, I respect Brandon Crawford, Brandon Belt, but some of those pieces are kind of towards the end here. So could they go out and make a big splash? It wouldn't shock me one bit.
Yeah, they're going to have to make a move. I mean, if they're serious about this season and kind of making a push. I mean, look, with no expanded postseason, if the Giants somehow make the playoffs, that means that there's going to be a team that doesn't make it that we thought absolutely either was going to make it or we're going to be in the mix to make it. That's going to affect the NL East, who could have had, 3 or 4 teams that are really in the mix down the stretch. If the Giants are in, well, they're not going to be up in New York, for example.
No, and what I look at with the Giants here is they're built for postseason baseball. It's great pitching. They're great in close games, and that bullpen gets the job done. You factor in those things. Listen, one of those NL East teams that are sloppy, like the Phillies, for example, who just, ugly defensive miscues that cost them games, a couple different times to the point where Joe Girardi's calling these guys out. And that's not the kind of guy Joe Girardi is. He's a pretty positive dude. So when he speaks out and he says, listen, we just play sloppy baseball, that tells me a lot. It wouldn't surprise me. The Giants are just a well put together team that has not even hit its stride because they're not fully healthy yet.
Yep, and you talk about the intangibles. People can roll their eyes, but Buster Posey leading the team, I'd take that any day of the week. Okay, especially at the end of his career, for what it is. I mean, Longoria, don't put it past him. He's kind of having a resurgence as well. So I'm really liking the Giants, and they're fun to watch. I mean, I watched the series against the Padres. I was interested in that, and they held their own. They really did. The bullpen I like. They got some pieces there. I like the Giants, and I just don't know how long this is going to last because there's just so many good teams in the NL right now. I mean, the Giants, they can't stay around all season, can they?
There were a better team last year, and I think a lot of people missed this than people realize. They missed the playoffs on the last day of the season. They were that close to sneaking in. So I think this year, they came in with a chip on their shoulder. It's obvious, and the roster's a lot better than it was last year. I think you just have – it feels like a throwback team. This doesn't feel like a super modern baseball team, and that's not a disrespect or anything like that. I think on the pitching side, there is a little bit of it. But in terms of the roster construction, this isn't a star-studded team. It's just a lot of really solid pieces, a lot of veterans that, some have made their impact, some haven't, and some are going through resurgences. And it's a team that feels like you would have saw 10 years ago. And I think that's what kind of makes them interesting.
Hey, I think that's a compliment to call them a throwback team. I think that's not an insult at all right this. I think it's a compliment. I want to talk about the Royals. How about the Royals? Now, remember in those years, 2014-15, what was it built on? It was built on relief pitching. It was built on steady defensively. We'll put the ball in play, and we'll have some speed, too. It's kind of the same thing now. And I think that we're overlooking the Royals. We'll talk about the Central in a minute here with the White Sox. There's an opportunity for the Royals and the AL to make it interesting. Okay, I love their bullpen. The bullpen's real good. And with a guy like Merrifield, who's just, I don't know how underrated, he might be the most underrated player in baseball, quite frankly. Yeah. And, okay, now, and there's guys struggling. Soler didn't get off to the best start. What if Soler starts hitting big time? So the Royals are better than people think. Bobby Witt Jr., are we going to see him at some point? Okay, there's going to be some juice coming here. Kyle Isbell, I like him as a rookie. He's my kind of player. But I think the Royals bullpen, if they're going to pitch like that, they're going to have a chance.
I agree. And another thing I'd add, that last time we saw the Royals really hit their stride, what was the foundation of that team? These young homegrown players. And that's what you're seeing the Royals bring through right now. And, it's not as much on the position player side. It's more on the pitching side, which is, fascinating. We've seen Brady Singer, who's come up. Obviously, he's dealing with injuries. Chris Bubich just came up. Daniel Lynch just made his big league debut. There's real reinforcements coming to this rotation that might profile, as the season goes along, maybe better in the bullpen. And they've had excellent starting pitching across the boards almost, outside of Keller, really, who – it's unfortunate. He was so good last year, and it's kind of been the flip side of it. But, we mentioned players who got off to kind of slow starts. Look at Andrew Benintendi. I've been lower on him, but he's, made me look pretty stupid the last week and a half. If guys like that really start clicking and you mix that with a core, Aldoberto Mondesi, we're still waiting on him to come back. There's so many different pieces to this Royals team that, if they hit their full stride together, they're going to be a blast to watch, and they're a team that's going to make noise in that division. And, for what they're doing right now to be as good as they have to begin the year, you can't help but be impressed. Shout out to Dayton Moore and Mike Matheny.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Mike Matheny absolutely deserves a lot of credit there. And by the way, Salvador Perez, another guy who's just being overlooked. This guy, talk about all-time catchers. I'm not saying he's the greatest catcher of all time. He should at least be in the conversation when we talk about guys who define eras at the position. Salvador Perez is one of those guys, and he's still hitting well. The guy can still hit. He's going to be who he is behind the plate, which is very good. He's an important piece, similar to what Posey is with the Giants.
I agree. And listen, Salvador Perez, that power, he can hit the ball just about as far as anybody in the game right now. And I think having that foundational catcher gets overlooked in organizations from time to time, but it means even more when you have young pitchers coming through that you're hoping that are going to stick in your rotation and be part of your organization for long, times to come, long periods. He'll help guide those guys. He'll keep them on track. We can even look back to the Yordano Ventura, years where Salvador Perez was a big part of that and kind of getting him to, become one of the, more interesting and more dynamic pitchers in baseball.
Absolutely. And I think the Royals are real interesting because Minnesota got off to a slow start. And I think Minnesota is going to get it together very soon. Alex Kirilloff might be the best hitter on the team by August. Let me just say that. I know we all love Byron Buxton right now. Kirilloff, okay, this is adding a new element to the Twins that I think was much needed. Okay, that was the missing piece for me. The White Sox, we're going to get into them. Facing injuries, that's real bad blow. They admitted it themselves. Bad stuff in Chicago. The Royals, I don't know, there's an opportunity here. There absolutely is. Now, let's go to a little draft stuff, okay? Now, preparation for the MLB draft 2021. Jack Leiter, let's rewind about 3 weeks. We're saying this guy, first of all, he's never going to allow a hit ever, number one. Number two, he's absolutely going number one overall. And now you see Vanderbilt, they're running into some good lineups here. They play the Gators. You see them play in Tennessee. And, it's getting a little more difficult. The level of difficulty, a little higher for the lineup. Jack Leiter, struggling as of late. Should we read into any of that?
I wouldn't freak out too much. The last two starts definitely have not been vintage Jack Leiter. We've seen it. But, you look back to his last start against the Gators, who hit 2 home runs off of him? Judd Fabian. And, Fabian's one of the better, prospects in this draft class. Some thought he could sneak into the top 10 and, be one of those picks, one of those premier picks this year. Listen, I'm not freaking out about Jack Leiter. The guy has been absolutely ridiculous. The ERA is still barely above 2. He struck out over 14 batters per 9. The walks are high. I think that's something to keep an eye on. It's over 4 walks per 9 at the moment. But you go and look at the hits per 9 and you realize it's under 4. And then you're like, all right, now I see it. This is a guy who really hasn't had the chance to work over the course of a full season here, with this advanced stuff, with his new velo, the big steps he took during the shutdown. I'm curious to see if it falls off a little bit as the year goes along. And even if it does, I wouldn't panic too much. This is the first time we're really seeing it. He's maintained it so far. But I still think Jack Leiter's the guy we're talking about going first overall in a couple months. Or really, 2 months.
Yeah. And Pittsburgh will be thrilled if they can add him to the system. Now, I'm going to state the obvious, but I need to see an off-speed pitch from him, something that I can really pin in on and say, okay, there's that secondary pitch that's going to be a force when he gets to the major league level. I just haven't really seen it yet. So I'm concerned, and I look at Rocker, his teammate, who kind of brings a little more right now. Would you say that it's, hand in hand, Leiter, Rocker, and it's a toss-up, or is Leiter clearly number one here? Because I'm not sure anymore.
I still have Leiter ahead of him. Do I think there's a way by the end of the year, the College World Series comes and goes, say Kumar Rocker shines once again, and becomes the star of college baseball, he could move back into that number one spot. And a lot of people haven't given Kumar Rocker credit. He's had a great year, even though his last couple starts, like Leiter, have not been overly impressive. The thing with Leiter, I think that curveball is electric. I'm really the 12-6 drop on it is lethal. It's just the overall arsenal, the feel for pitching, still younger than a Kumar Rocker as well. I think the floor is higher, while Kumar Rocker, listen, that ceiling he could be a top of the rotation arm just like a Jack Leiter. But I think Jack Leiter as an overall package, it's easy to bet on, and the ceiling is still so high. I'd have to keep leaning that way. I was in love with him heading into this year. And listen, he wasn't, everyone saw Kumar Rocker as the number one guy. I was kind of saying, listen, I wouldn't be surprised 2 months into the year if everyone thinks Jack Leiter's the number one guy. I still think it's that way. But it's not impossible. Could he move himself down a couple slots with, a really rough ending to the year? Sure. I wouldn't bet on that happening.
Man, I tell you, those Vanderbilt games have been a lot of fun to watch, though. The fans are into it. It's really reminding me of where we were before the shutdown. I love it. I'm really enjoying these games.
College baseball is the most slept on thing in sports right now. If you want to see a game that is closer to old school baseball, the energy and everything, that college is where it's at. And unfortunately, it doesn't get the same love that a college football gets or a college basketball. But some of those games are as intense as you'll see it. They're doing bat flips now. They're really showing their personalities there. I love it. It's so much fun to watch. And, me being a big Red Sox guy, we're picking 4th overall this year, right? So I've been really keeping a close eye on everything going on. It's a really interesting, that top tier. It's, Leiter, Rocker, Mayer, and Lawler. That 4 guys right there. And they're super talented. And it wouldn't surprise me, if a Lawler could move up and maybe even challenge for that number 1 spot. Just because, the reports on him are just so high again and again and again. But if I was a betting man, I'd put my money on Leiter.
Yeah, and if I was a betting man, I'd go Lawler number 2 to the Rangers. It just makes way too much sense, right? He's a Texas kid. And, you got to think about the commitment with high school players, but he's just so good, right? I mean, he's going to come in right away that he can go pro, right? So I think Lawler to the Rangers. Now, it does concern me because the Rangers, when it comes to developing pitching, it's just been non-existent. And yet again, they take a position player, right? And the infield is sort of getting crowded as we go on here. I mean, Josh Young's in the system, and you see Isaiah Kiner Falefa really emerging now. And, at shortstop, you talk about a good glove. So the infield is getting crowded. Nick Solak looks good. Nate Lowe looks good. So
yeah,
where do you fit in Jordan Lawler? But I think it makes too much sense to have Jordan Lawler go to the Rangers. We'll talk about a lot of the draft stuff, but Lawler to the Rangers, do you see him going number 2? I mean, the Rangers can probably start really bolstering up that pitching system.
I think Kumar Rocker would have to have a really special end of the year to pass Lawler in that spot. And with Lawler, listen, while the Rangers infield is very full at the moment, or, it's starting to look that way, I think it's going to be a while before he's at the big league level. We're talking about a prep shortstop here who, while the tools are evident and you can get excited, let's be real. Most likely we're not seeing him for 3 to 4 years. Who knows where the Rangers will be at that point. So, we'll wait and see. But at the end of the day, you take it's not need. You usually don't draft based on need. You draft on the best thing on your board, especially in the MLB draft. So I'd lean that way. I think Lawler makes a lot of sense. But listen, if Kumar Rocker balls out, I couldn't hate on the Rangers for going that route either.
I wouldn't mind it. I wouldn't mind it at all. And like you say, this isn't the NFL draft, right? I mean, look, the Patriots needed a quarterback. They're going to go get a quarterback, right? I mean, it's just that simple. Was Mac Jones the best player available? I don't know. He might have been, but he might have not been, but they still took him. They need a quarterback, right?
Listen, yeah, even Belichick, not to get into too much football talk here, but, he stated in his presser, he didn't confirm whether that was the number 1 player he had left on his board at that point. It just made the most sense, right? But when you need a franchise quarterback and most likely Mac Jones will be playing at some point this upcoming season, especially when Cam Newton is your quarterback. That's what it is, right? Just with the Rangers and where they're at, you bring Lawler in, there's a fair chance, 80% of that roster isn't there by the time he makes it to the big leagues.
Exactly. And who knows Josh Young? Who knows what kind of player he's going to be? He's injured right now.
Yeah, what trades you might make, who knows? What signings you pull off. So much could shake out. But when you're Lawler and guys are giving you comps to Derek Jeter, but with a more all-around toolbox, come on. How can you not get excited about something like that?
Right, and we'll see what the Rangers do in free agency. We all know that sometimes they could make a splash. Who knows? They were in on Rendon. It didn't happen. Bring him home. Trevor Story, he's from that area as well. Maybe they'll be in on him. I don't know. Now, Trevor Story.
They sniffed around on Nolan Arenado, too, when the trade rumors were going around.
That's right. Could you believe that? I mean, the position that the Rangers are in right now, and they would be in a position to acquire Nolan Arenado, that really surprised me. But it is what it is, and you never know if the Rangers. Now, instant replay. Sunday Night Baseball, yet again. and another game involving the Phillies. Now, this was the right call, though, right? Rhys Hoskins goes the other way here, and it looks to hit the railing, which is in play, right? And that's a double right there. It looks like it didn't hit the seat. Right now, that would have tied the game. That would have been a blown save, right? It was just a mess. And you can imagine what the Mets were thinking in that position. And Mets fans, oh, no, here we go. But it takes a long time replay. I mean, we have replay very often. You can watch a game today. The umps might put on the headset 3 times.
Yeah, and listen, number one, people are complaining, about the whole replay situation with Hoskins. If it went the other way and we, say there's no instant replay and we watch that highlight on SportsCenter and the Phillies go on to win, everyone would be crying that it wasn't fair and all this different stuff. My issue with replay, it's just the system. Certain things you can challenge, certain things you can't. It doesn't ever seem to work when you need it to. There's times where it's clearly obvious the call is wrong and they still don't make the change because, they lean on that. Oh, well, there's no definitive evidence. When, listen, dude, I'm watching it on my TV right now. There's definitive evidence. Stuff like that. And, the other thing is the whole, stupid little, I watch it all the time with the Red Sox. Alec Cora is at the top of the dugout. 1 minute while they're on the phone. Like, dude, that is so stupid. You either challenge it or you don't. It should be 15 seconds or something like that. Depend on your player who's on the field, who hit first base to tell you, challenge that.
Right.
Sitting on the phone and talking, having a full-blown conversation here, it defeats the whole purpose. You're getting to the point where it's, there's no, you should be kind of sitting there. There should be a little bit of a competitive edge to it, I think.
I agree. Listen, and I'm thinking about the NFL here. You think like Matt LaFleur, for example, in Green Bay, you think that he's on the phone with someone, hey, can you check this out for me? I want to see if that's a check. No, he's throwing his flag out, and that's it because he saw it. You got to use your judgment, right? I mean, if you're Alex Cora in the dugout, you're watching the game. I mean, what do you think?
What are you doing?
Yeah,
like, this is your job to watch and tell us what you think. Like, that's the whole point. And that's what gets me frustrated. It's like, you're sitting there on the phone and you're, back and forth. And, before you realize it, a minute or two has gone by, waiting, go back and forth. The umpires now come together. You're 2 minutes in. The replay takes 2 more minutes. Before you know it, it's been 5 or 6 minutes of the game slowed down. And you're just, it ruins the whole kind of experience. You just kind of fall out of it. Baseball is such a groove sport when you get in the game. You stop it for 5-6 minutes. It's like, all right, like, here we go. Now we got to pick everything back up again.
Yeah. And, to your point, I agree with you. And some things should be challengeable. Some things maybe not. But then the problem is the argument will be, why isn't everything reviewable? Everything needs to be reviewable. That's the whole point of replay. So now we fall into that problem. And it drives me nuts. I see managers at the top of the dugout. They're looking back at their guy. You're checking that out, right? Hold on, umpire. We got to hold on here. I mean, what are we doing here? I mean, like, seriously, it's like, I can't, it's frustrating, isn't it, when you're watching a game?
And how many times does it happen where they're telling them to wait and then they're like, never mind, it's not worth it. It's never mind. Yeah. Dude, you just stalled the game for 1 or 2 minutes. And, people want to say that happens 2 or 3 times a game. That's 7-8 minutes shaved off, and that's a lot when you're looking at the calculus and, realistically, from the 90s to now, it's about a 20-25 minute difference in how long games are. You shave 8-10 minutes off of that, you're in a much better situation. You're looking where you were about a decade ago. That's a big step in the right direction for, the pace of play issues.
The problem is, how do we fix it, right? Because now we can't go backwards on replay. We've opened Pandora's box on the whole thing, and here we are, right? So what's the solution? I don't know. I'm not going to act like I have the solution.
No, it's hard. They need to find a system that works. It's even more complicated when you bring in the robot umps conversation and all these different things starting to come in. Realistically, I think you should put a 15-second timer on the end of the play. If they don't throw, if they don't signal over to the ump or not, keep it moving. Is it that simple? No. You know what I mean? It's hard to put that timer. We've seen pitchers ignore the pitch timers and different stuff like that. It's just, like you said, they've opened Pandora's box, and now this is another issue that's been created.
It's the theme of COVID for me, and this has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but there's been so many times in sports that Pandora's box has been opened over the last year, and now here we are, and now we can't go back, right? I look at the NBA with the play-in, this whole thing. It's like, well, that was because Pandora's box got opened, right? The runner on second base. Pandora's box was opened. What are we going to do, right? It's just a little too overboard for me. I don't know what's going on, and Pandora's box is a very dangerous thing, let me tell you.
Yeah, I hope, with the CBA negotiation, there's going to be a lot of things changing this upcoming winter. They need to figure this out because the current system doesn't work. And unfortunately, it says a lot that as many people, like when instant replay first started, it felt like a majority of people were pretty excited about it. Now, all these years later, we kind of look at it and it's like, every time the umps start to come together and you have one of those moments, you have a bad taste in your mouth. You don't trust them to get the call right. And that shouldn't be how this goes. That's not what it was designed to. And I think that tells the whole story.
I believe the first World Series to have instant replay was 2014. And of course, the year before, Red Sox Cardinals, there was a bit of a controversy going on. And what was it, game 2?
It was the Will Middlebrooks play where there was the obstruction call with Alan Craig. And, he tripped over, or Alan Craig tripped over Will Middlebrooks, ended up going home, gets tagged out on a great relay, and he gets ruled safe because of obstruction. And, Pedroia is sitting there running out, trying to tell them, what's going on here, da-da-da-da-da. It's great, like for that stuff, it works in those moments. But, those moments are rare, right? Let's be realistic here. We're talking about the overall consistent day-to-day thing you see. And the consistent day-to-day thing you see, especially this year, blown calls, long meetings, and a lot of people disappointed and frustrated.
Yep, absolutely. It takes a long time, point blank about it. And we got to make a decision. I'm talking collectively, everybody, watchers, fans, okay? If you're involved, we need to know. It can't go both ways. What do you want? More replay, less replay, or more time? What's the trade-off here?
How long does it take to tell you? It should take less than 30 seconds. Whoever the guy, sitting there watching the game, whatever, he should look at it, have every angle he needs to see it, and be able to give you an answer in 15 seconds. How does it take 3 minutes to tell you if someone's safe or out at first base? I can see it on my TV. It does not take that long.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's a whole process too. And they have to do it, then they got to go in New York now. And it's just everything. The call on the field, what was it? It's a whole process. I need to know why managers can't use their judgment to watch a game. I mean, I know they want confirmation, and if that's available to them, yeah, go for it. Of course they want confirmation. But I never understood that. When I first saw replay being implemented, I'm going, hold on. They're allowed to watch the play and then decide whether to challenge? I was confused by that.
Me too.
Yeah.
I never
be allowed.
Yeah. I never thought it was going to be like that. And I think it's gotten a little bit better in recent years. Like when it first started, we're talking, they take 2 minutes on the phone sitting there trying to figure it out. And that was brutal. It's still not very effective. It's not very efficient. And there has to be a better way of going about this.
All right. Luis Robert, he's out 12, 16 weeks now. And this is a big blow for the White Sox. We already saw what happened with Eloy Jimenez. So the White Sox are in a position now where it's like, all right, do we have enough depth here to compete down the stretch? I mean, maybe Eloy, we see him in September, hopefully. I mean, that's best case scenario. And Luis Robert now, I mean, we don't know if that can even extend. This is a tough situation for Tony La Russa.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. You look at Luis Robert and the kind of player he is too, who just strives off athleticism, and you're telling me he completely tore his hip flexor. That's really troubling. And he's a young guy, you know what I mean? Hopefully the body bounces back. But are we talking about someone who won't have the same speed dynamic he once did? And, he hasn't even really hit his stride in the big leagues yet. And that's the concerning part. And you look at them, Eloy going down, that outfield depth was already getting tested. You're now leaning on Andrew Vaughn, a guy who had never played above high A entering this year. And he's had a good start to the year. The power's not there, which you would expect from him, but the OBP's like 370. His WRC plus is like 116, I believe. So he's a promising prospect, but to put this much pressure on him this early in the year, that seems like a recipe for disaster.
Well, you know what? Before Eloy went down, we were talking about Andrew Vaughn. Hey, maybe he'll get called up in June or so. Now all of a sudden, Eloy goes down. Andrew Vaughn's got to learn how to play the outfield. And now Robert goes down, and you're looking at the lineup, and you're going, okay, now we need some power from Andrew Vaughn, and he's got to have it now. And I just don't know if he's in a position to do that. I mean, he got off to a slow start. He's been okay ever since then. He's seeing the ball better, which is good. But, I mean, this is a team that wants to win now. I mean, they're in contention, and to have these injuries and to rely on Andrew Vaughn, it's problematic.
Yeah, listen, when you have Lurie Garcia going out there and lining up for you on a regular basis, it's not going to get the job done. And this puts, more pressure on a guy like Mercedes, who's been great to start this year. Will he keep it up the whole year? We'll see. You know what I mean? It's hard to bet on it sustaining for a long period of time. It's just they're now in a slot. They're going to probably have to make a big move at the trade deadline if they hope to kind of, push, if they still want these World Series aspirations. And that scares me because now you're going to start dealing from depth, and you're going to start to force things that, really the writing's on the wall. This doesn't look like a World Series caliber team anymore. And I could be really scared they force a move at the deadline and kind of screw things up.
Yeah, they got to be careful. I mean, no panic moves. I mean, this team is built to win, not just now, but I think down the road here too. So no panic. And with Mercedes, it's like if he cooled down and went back to earth before the injuries, it's okay, right? Right? The team's still good. Now it's like, okay, well, he's kind of got to keep hitting, or else the lineup just won't be sustainable at all.
Yeah, and you look at you put Robert out in center field. He's a really important kind of defensive piece for them too. So it's just a lot, and you're betting on guys, coming back from injuries. If you're telling me you think Eloy Jimenez is going to hit after missing, 95% of the baseball season, yikes, man, that's not a good bet. And you put the same on Luis Robert whenever he does get ready, betting on him to go full speed in playoff situations coming off an injury like that. Like, yikes, man, this is really intense baseball and coming off injuries that are not, small things for either one of these guys. And, these are foundation pieces for years to come. It's not ideal in a lot of different ways.
They do have the American League MVP from 2020, so that you're going to have to kind of rest on that, right?
But even in a Jose Abreu, listen, last year was great. Is that yearly Jose Abreu? It's not. So there's a lot of little warning signs, but they have other things. That rotation now, I think, is going to be carrying an even heavier workload. And we've seen Carlos Rodon has taken a big step forward. Michael Kopech in the bullpen. Oh my God, he could go out there and start right now and be easily one of the better pitchers in baseball. So I think that's where you're going to see the strengths of this team start to lie.
Absolutely. The bullpen has just a number of pieces that you can throw out there in different situations. Lance Lynn is back. That was one of the big offseason moves. So I think it's all about pitching now for the White Sox. Keep the pitching together, get healthy. It's going to take time, and hopefully a contribution from Andrew Vaughn. You're going to need Abreu to not be MVP Abreu, but be one of the better hitting first basemen in baseball, and Moncada, right? You got to get something from Moncada.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. And, with Vaughn playing a majority of the outfield, it's not like he is some stud out there either. So,
No.
You're missing. There's a lot of little pieces of this game where you lose, great defense out in the outfield. You're losing bat. It just affects so many parts of the game. Robert on the base pass, like so many different layers to it.
Yeah, you lose a bat, you lose defense, and you lose speed. That's what's happened here, right? And with Eloy, you lose all your power. So it's really something that's troubling. And they came out and said it flat out. This is a big blow. We'll see how the White Sox do. The Royals playing well definitely doesn't help. Quickly, before we wrap up, the Rockies general manager out, resigned. I know you're not a big Jeff Bridich fan. Would that be fair to say?
110%. It's embarrassing just what he has done over the years since taking over for Dan O'Down. Let me see. Let's just go down this list here. I ended up typing it out earlier while I was kind of digging through, and I'm not trying to harp on the man by any chance, but what this guy was doing. Ian Desmond, Wade Davis, Brian Shaw, Jake McGee, Daniel Murphy. And these are just some of the misses. And, we're looking at a guy in Ian Desmond who, when that contract was signed, anybody could have told you it was going to be a failure. We're talking about them picking Daniel Murphy over DJ LeMahieu, and, you look at that money and everything. DJ LeMahieu didn't sign for much different than Daniel Murphy did when he went to the Yankees. So it's just, and this is a guy who won 2 Gold Gloves for you. He won a batting title in Colorado, and you still couldn't recognize the player he was. There's not a person in baseball who doesn't look at DJ LeMahieu as one of the better hitters in the game now. And you continue to look, signing Ian Desmond when they did. They gave up the 11th overall pick in the 2017 draft. Like, if you could think of more backwards thinking baseball, this is what it is. Like, if anyone ever even thought about doing something like that in today's game, you get laughed out of the room.
Yep.
This is what it was. And it's unfortunate. Listen, he got them to the postseason a couple of times, but once again, he failed when the pitching started to, come up a little bit, whether it was a Kyle Freeland or a Marquez. He didn't supplement them with anything. He just said, all right, figure it out. Poor relations with Nolan Arenado. I think the Rockies just said, listen, this is already a disaster. We should have fired you entering the year. We gave you a little run. This team still sucks. Trevor Story is going to be a free agent. We need to handle this the right way. whether it is dealing him at the deadline or trying to, work out a contract extension or not. He just wasn't the guy to bet on it.
There comes a point in every organization where you have to put your foot down and say, you can't make the next move, right? We see this a lot in sports. The next move, quote unquote, like a big one, that's Trevor Story and what's going to happen with him. He can't make that move, right? And he's proved that he can. I had some free time the other day and I was watching the Rockies and Cubs and that wild card game in 2018 and a great game. And I'm looking at the Rockies lineup and I'm going, that lineup can stand toe to toe with anyone in baseball. It was always pitching for me. It was like, what's going on with the pitching? I know John Gray has looked good at sometimes and Zenzatella maybe looks good at sometimes, but overall, that's the Achilles heel for the Rockies. And it has been since the beginning of the franchise existed.
Yeah. He never supplemented it and it made no sense. Why was there never that, number 3 middle, innings eater thrown in there? You put more and more pressure on these young pitchers and expecting them. You wonder why a Kyle Freeland fell apart. You know what I mean? Why a John Gray has been so inconsistent from year to year. There's nothing backing them. There's no backbone to that rotation. And instead you dish out money on, older veterans, utility guys that are, fine players coming off a really good year, and you throw money and hope, oh, well, now he's here. It didn't work. And, we were talking about it before the show. You wasted Charlie Blackmon's prime, like another guy who was one of the better players in baseball for a 4 or 5 year span. Nolan Arenado, he's look at him in St. Louis. He's had a pretty good start to the season over there. He looks rejuvenated. I haven't seen him having this much fun playing baseball in a long time. So it's sad to see. It's really sad. And I hope the Rockies, whatever they do, they need to put the right man in place. It reminds me, when the Red Sox were sitting there with Dave Dombrowski and they realized they had to trade Mookie Betts, they said, listen, Dave Dombrowski can't make this move for us. We can't trust him. Let's bring in Chaim Bloom. They need to find their Chaim Bloom.
That's a great comparison, right? With the Mookie Betts trade, it's like, oh, no. He can't make this move, right? That is when you got to go in a different direction. When there's a pending move that's going to be made and you just don't trust the guy to make it, it's like, all right, that proves it to you right there. It's time to go in a different direction. He resigned. It's not like he was fired out of the blue or anything, but you know what? That's the move. Trevor Story. What's going to happen with him? Right. And with the Rockies, I think the ballpark plays a role in all this. They're like, well, you know what? Forget the rotation. Let's make the lineup the priority. Look at our ballpark. You play half your games there. Okay. It's not as though you're playing there 162 times a year, right? When you go into Philadelphia, when you go into New York, you're going to have to face lineups and you don't have the pitching to do so.
No. And I wish, it just feels like the organization isn't forward thinking enough. You've seen, different organizations get certain pitchers that fit their ballparks. If you're the Rockies, you think, all right, let's bring in some ground ball pitchers. Let's go that route. And we've seen guys succeed there. It's not impossible. Marquez, Freeland, Ubaldo Jimenez. Let's go a little farther back. These guys, they succeeded. And, you look at Jimenez, he succeeded for years at one point. It's not impossible. It's just, are you putting the proper resources into it? And they haven't. They just continue to ignore it and hope they're going to slug their way to every single win. And that's just not realistic, no matter who you are.
Even going back a little further, Jeff Francis was a real good pitcher. They had him, so there have been pieces, but it just really hasn't come together. And you know what? Look, at the end of the day, your division, I don't know what to tell you if you're the Rockies. The Dodgers are here to stay. The Padres are here to stay. We talked about the Giants this offseason. Watch out. They're going to make a move, a splash. They already look good. It's a well-oiled machine in San Francisco. And Arizona's on the up and coming. I feel much better about Arizona right now than I do Colorado.
Yeah, I agree. Listen, Arizona, while they have their own issues, it's an organization that's moving up. They're not going down. They have a really good manager in Torey Lovello over there. A lot of young pieces that are, quite promising. Look at Carson Kelly right now. There's things to be excited. Zach Gallen, they don't have anything close. They just don't have anything like that except Trevor Story. And Trevor Story's most likely not going to be there 3 months from now.
I'll tell you what, if I was in Phoenix right now, I'd be real excited about Zach Gallen. I think this is a guy you got to keep an eye on. If you're in the Phoenix area and you're thinking, why would I watch the Diamondbacks this year? Watch his starts. Every fifth day, watch Zach Gallen pitch. I think it's worth it.
He's putting on a clinic. This is a guy who really just his feel for pitching is as good as anybody you're going to see in the entire game. And he keeps getting better. That's the crazy part. The stuff continues to tick up. Yeah, must watch when he's on the mound. And just overall, that Diamondbacks roster has a lot of really exciting pieces. Ketel Marte's down right now, but we've seen, when he's healthy, he's as electric as anyone. Eduardo Escobar has been ridiculous to start this year. There's a lot of fun things on that roster. And while they certainly have holes right now, they're moving in the right direction.
That is The Squeeze. It's Primetime Sports Talk. You can see us on YouTube, audio version. If you want to listen in podcast form, you can do that as well. Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, The Squeeze. We are there. Tyler, always a pleasure. I'll see you next week. And as we're recording this, the Astros are getting set to go into Yankee Stadium. There's a bit of an elephant in the room here that I don't think I even need to address. Do you think that it will carry over a little bit today? I mean, it's not full capacity at Yankee Stadium, but they might be quite loud tonight.
With Dusty Baker's recent comments, I have a really strong feeling we'll be talking about this a week from now.
Perfect. Sounds good to me. Hopefully no one gets hurt. Let's just put it that way. But it should be very interesting. That's The Squeeze. We'll see you next week. For Logan Lockhart, that is Tyler Milliken on Primetime Sports Talk.